Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something that'll make your cozy bed feel like an absolute luxury: the filthy, chaotic, utterly unromantic reality of medieval battlefield trenches. You know those epic movies where armored knights clash in glorious combat? Yeah, forget all that. We're talking about the part they never show. The days and weeks spent crouching in a muddy ditch outside castle walls, waiting for someone to either kill you or for dysentery to do the job first. You're cold, you're wet, your armor's chafing in places you didn't know could chafe, and honestly, you probably won't make it to breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wild to see how we're all scattered across the globe, united by our love of history that helps us drift off to sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the siege line just before dawn on a morning in 1346, somewhere in what'll eventually be called France. The air smells like a combination of wet earth, unwashed bodies, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's the latrine's upwind, probably both. You're part of an English army besieging a moderately important fortress, and your lord has decided that digging approach trenches is the strategic move. Congratulations, you've been volunteered. The assembly area is pure chaos masquerading as military organization. Hundreds of men mill about in the pre-dawn darkness, some wearing actual armor, most wearing whatever they could afford or steal. There's no uniform drill, no synchronized formations like you'd see in a Renaissance army just 2 centuries later. Instead, you've got clusters of men-at-arms standing near their specific lords, archers checking their bowstrings, and a whole mess of folks like you common laborers conscripted into this mess because you happen to live on the wrong piece of land when the king sent out his call to arms. Your commander for this operation is a knight you've seen exactly once, and he's currently arguing with another knight about whose men should dig which section of trench. Medieval military hierarchy is less about clear chain of command and more about a complicated web of personal obligations, land ownership, and who owes what to whom. The result? Nobody's entirely sure who's in charge of what until someone with enough authority shows up and starts hitting people with the flat of their sword. A sergeant, basically a professional soldier who's survived long enough to boss people around, finally organizes your group into something resembling order. He's missing 3 fingers on his left hand, and you try not to think about how that happened. He's also missing most of his patience. You lot, he barks, gesturing at your cluster with his mangled hand. You're on the second parallel. Grab tools from the supply cart and try not to kill yourselves before the French get a chance. The supply situation is, let's say, optimistic. There are exactly 7 shovels for your group of 20 men. The rest of you get wooden stakes, wickedly sharp but completely useless for digging, or actual farming tools that someone's great-grandfather probably used to till fields. You end up with something that might have been a hoe in a previous life. It's got a crack running down the handle, and you're pretty sure it won't last the morning. As you trudge toward your assigned position, you pass the first parallel, the initial trench line dug 3 days ago. It's supposed to be your protection, the base from which you'll advance closer to the castle walls. What you see instead is a muddy scar in the earth, barely deep enough to hide a crouching man, already partially collapsed on one side where the dirt's too sandy to hold. Men huddle inside it, looking exactly as miserable as you're about to feel. The walk to the digging site takes you across open ground, and this is where the reality of medieval siege warfare really hits you. You're going to be working about 200 yards from the castle walls, well within range of their archers, their crossbowmen, and if they're feeling particularly energetic, their small siege weapons. The whole point of approach trenches is to provide cover while you advance toward the fortress, zigzagging your way closer under the protection of earthworks. But here's the thing nobody mentions. Someone has to dig those trenches first, and that means exposing yourself to enemy fire while you're bent over with a farming tool. Dawn's breaking now, painting the sky in shades of gray that would be beautiful if you weren't acutely aware that it also means the castle defenders can see you. The fortress looms ahead, surprisingly intact despite days of bombardment. Its walls are thick stone, the kind that laugh at anything short of a proper trebuchet, and you can already see movement along the battlements. They're watching you, waiting. Your sergeant stops the group about 50 yards from where the second parallel should begin. Right? He says, with the tone of someone explaining something to particularly stupid children. We're going to advance in groups. First group digs while archers provide cover. When they've got a decent hole started, next group moves up. Anyone who runs gets a pike in the back from our own men. Anyone who freezes gets an arrow from theirs. Questions? Nobody asks questions. You're all too busy contemplating the fact that your survival for the next few hours depends on how fast you can move dirt with a broken hoe while people actively try to kill you. The first group moves forward at a crouch, and immediately the castle wakes up. You hear the distinctive thwack of crossbow strings, the whistle of arrows cutting through morning air. Most miss shooting down at a steep angle is harder than it looks, but you watch one man in the first group suddenly pitch forward, an arrow sprouting from his shoulder. He doesn't scream, just makes this awful wheezing sound, and keeps crawling forward because going back means desertion, and desertion means hanging. Your group is next. The sergeant counts to 3, though you're pretty sure he skips 2 entirely, and suddenly you're running in a half-crouch across muddy ground that seems to grab at your feet with every step. Your broken hoe weighs about 1,000 pounds. Your heartbeat is so loud you can't hear the arrows anymore, which is almost worse because you don't know when. You make it. You're at the digging site, throwing yourself down into the shallow scrape the first group started. And your hands are shaking so badly it takes 3 tries to grip your tool properly. The man next to you has already started digging with manic intensity, throwing dirt like his life depends on it. Which, to be fair, it absolutely does. Medieval siege trenches weren't the sophisticated zigzag affairs you'd see in later centuries. The techniques you're using right now are crude, based on trial and error rather than engineering principles. The idea is simple. Dig a ditch deep and wide enough to move through while crouched. Pile the excavated dirt on the side facing the enemy to create a parapet, and hope the whole thing doesn't collapse before you reach the walls. Historians still argue whether medieval engineers actually understood the geometric principles behind approach trenches or were just copying Roman designs without fully grasping the math involved. You dig. God, do you dig? Every shovelful of earth is a small victory against death. The soil here is a mix of clay and rock, the kind that makes your tool bounce when you hit it wrong, the kind that clumps together in heavy, wet chunks that spray mud in your face when you throw them. Your back starts screaming within 10 minutes. Within 20, your hands are bleeding where the rough wood of your hoe handle has worn through skin. Above you, English archers are doing their best to suppress the castle defenders, sending volleys of arrows up at the battlements to make them keep their heads down. It's partially working. The incoming fire slackens, becomes sporadic rather than constant. But sporadic still means occasional arrows thudding into the dirt around you, or worse, into people around you. A quirky bit of medieval military history. Some siege commanders would actually assign musicians to play during trench digging operations, the theory being that music kept workers' spirits up and helped them maintain rhythm. You don't have musicians. You have a sergeant shouting creatively obscene instructions and a growing pile of dirt that's supposed to keep you alive. 2 hours in, you've created something that almost resembles a trench. It's about 4 feet deep in the deepest part, maybe 6 feet wide, and runs in a rough line toward the castle for about 30 yards. Your parapet wall of dirt on the enemy side ice pathetically low, built from the clay-heavy soil that keeps slumping back into the trench. But it's something. It's cover. Then the castle deploys their surprise. You hear a whistling sound different from arrows, and suddenly there's an impact about 10 feet away that sprays everyone with rocks and dirt. They've brought out a small mangonel, a stone-throwing device that's absolutely devastating against personnel in the open. The rock barely bigger than a man's head, but traveling at lethal speed, has cratered the ground and partially collapsed one section of your barely started trench. This is the moment you understand why medieval siege warfare had such horrific casualty rates. You're trapped in a partial ditch, unable to effectively defend yourself, unable to retreat without being cut down, unable to advance without tools and time you don't have. You're just stuck, digging, praying, and trying not to think about the fact that this is only day one of what might be a months-long siege. The sergeant orders everyone deeper into the trench, packed in like sardines, while he sends a runner back to the command post requesting either more covering fire or permission to withdraw. Neither arrives. Instead, you get a fresh group of diggers who crowd into your trench and start extending it forward, which means you're now shoulder to shoulder with strangers, all of you covered in mud, all of you trying to make yourselves as small as possible while still somehow digging. Welcome to medieval trench warfare. The day's barely started, and you're already wondering if desertion might be worth the hanging after all. The trench you're huddling in bears absolutely no resemblance to the confident lines drawn on whatever map your commanders are consulting back at the pavilion. On paper, this is probably a neat geometric progression toward the castle walls, a textbook example of siegecraft. In reality, it's a barely controlled disaster zone masquerading as military engineering. You shift your position slightly, trying to find a spot where you're not actively sinking into mud, and immediately your foot breaks through what you thought was solid ground. The bottom of the trench isn't uniform. How could it be when 20 men with improvised tools are frantically digging while being shot at? Instead, it's a landscape of holes within holes, some spots excavated down to harder clay, others barely scratched at the surface. Where you've just punched through is apparently a pocket of much softer earth. And now your leg is stuck knee-deep in cold, wet muck that has the consistency of porridge and smells considerably worse. The man next to you, a farmer from somewhere you've never heard of, with the kind of permanent dirt under his fingernails that suggests he's been working earth his whole life, doesn't even look over. Happens, he mutters, still chipping away at the trench wall with a tool that might have been a spade once upon a time. Dig long enough, you hit different soil. Sometimes it's rock. Sometimes it's whatever that is. He gestures vaguely at the mud claiming your leg. Just hope it's not a grave. That's a fun thought you didn't need. Medieval armies had a habit of besieging the same strategic locations repeatedly over centuries. The ground around any important fortress was likely churned up by previous conflicts, previous sieges, previous trenches. And yes, previous bodies. The earth you're digging through right now might contain the remains of soldiers who died doing exactly what you're doing, just in a different year, under a different king's banner. You wrench your leg free with an unpleasant sucking sound and try to focus on the structural integrity of your shelter, which is to say, you try to ignore how little structural integrity it actually has. The walls of the trench are supposed to be angled sloped back to prevent collapse, but nobody had time to dig properly. Instead, they're nearly vertical in places, the clay-heavy soil holding together through sheer stubbornness rather than any engineering principle. You can see finger marks where men clawed at the earth, can see the rough gouges from tools swung in panic rather than precision. Every few minutes, a chunk of the wall just gives up. A section the size of your torso will suddenly slide down with a wet slap, partially filling the trench floor and covering anyone unlucky enough to be beneath it. You've already been buried to the waist once, and watching grown men frantically dig out their companions with hands, not tools, because tools might injure them, has become disturbingly routine. The parapet, that supposedly protective wall of dirt on the enemy-facing side, is even more pathetic up close. This may be 2 feet high at its tallest point, constructed from whatever soil you've excavated, which means it's the same unstable clay and rock mixture that keeps trying to flow back into the trench. Someone's had the bright idea to reinforce it with wooden stakes driven into the ground at angles, creating a kind of primitive fascine. It might stop an arrow. It definitely won't stop a stone from the castle's siege engines. Here's something they don't tell you about medieval earthworks. They're alive. Not literally, obviously, but they move, shift, settle, and collapse in ways that make them feel almost malicious. The trench you're in right now will look completely different in 6 hours. Sections will have caved in. Other parts will have been hastily shored up with whatever materials are available, planks stolen from supply wagons, bundles of sticks, the occasional piece of armor from someone who won't be needing it anymore. A crossbow bolt suddenly punches through the parapet about a foot from your head, the iron point stopping just inches from your face. It's embedded so deep in the packed earth that it quivers slightly, like it's angry it missed. You stare at it, at the surprisingly clean hole it's made through your supposedly protective wall, and you realize that cover is a very relative term. The sergeant crawls over because standing is suicide, and even crouching makes you a target, and yanks the bolt free with a grunt. French crossbows, he observes, examining the quarrel with professional interest. Good steel point, decent fletching, probably one of their garrison troops, not a conscript. He tosses it aside. Means they're getting serious about discouraging us. You want to ask what not serious looks like if this is them getting serious, but your mouth is too dry. Fear has a way of making everything taste like copper and dust. The trench extends forward and backward from your position, curving slightly because medieval siege trenches rarely ran straight. Partly this was tactical. A curved or zigzagging trench meant that defenders couldn't fire down the entire length if they captured one end. Mostly, though, it was because nobody was using surveying equipment while arrows were falling. The trench went where the diggers thought it should go, guided by shouted instructions and rough estimations rather than careful measurement. Peering back toward the English lines, you can see where this trench connects to the first parallel, that initial line dug days ago that's supposed to serve as your supply route and fallback position. The connection point is a disaster. The 2 trenches meet at different depths, meaning there's an awkward step where the ground height changes abruptly. Men struggle over it constantly, tripping, dropping supplies, creating a bottleneck that slows everything down. Historians still argue whether medieval siege engineers actually planned these trench networks in advance or were essentially making it up as they went along. And looking at this mess, you're firmly in the making it up camp. A runner comes scrambling down the trench, splashing through the ankle-deep water that's accumulated in the lower spots. Because of course there's water. Your trench has inadvertently tapped into the local water table, or maybe it's just rain runoff, or perhaps it's seepage from the castle's moat, which is definitely not sanitary. Whatever the source, you're now working in a ditch that's slowly filling with liquid of questionable origin. Orders from the knight. The runner gasps, because apparently the commander has decided to make an appearance in the planning, if not in person. We're to extend forward another 20 yards before nightfall. Need to reach that slight rise before the French fortify it. 20 yards. You look at the pathetic progress you've made so far. Look at your broken hoe. Look at the walls that keep collapsing. And wonder if the knight has actually seen what he's ordering or if he's working purely from his imagination of what siege warfare should look like. The farmer next to you spits into the mud. 20 yards. He repeats flatly. Right? And I suppose we'll do it with our teeth since half the tools are broken. He's not wrong. Your hoe finally gave up about an hour ago. The crack in the handle splitting completely, leaving you with 2 pieces of wood and a metal blade that won't attach to anything. Around you, other men are working with increasingly improvised implements. Someone's using a helmet to scoop dirt. Another man is literally digging with a broken sword, stabbing at the earth to loosen it, then scooping it away with his hands. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from this work, different from farm labor or even battlefield combat. It's the combination of physical exertion, constant terror, and the psychological weight of knowing that every shovelful of dirt might be the difference between life and death. Your muscles are screaming, your hands are raw and bleeding, and you've been breathing in dust and clay particles for hours until your lungs feel like they're coated in mud. And the smell. Oh, the smell. You've been trying to ignore it, but it's impossible now. The trench reeks of disturbed earth. Yes, but also of the men packed into iron-washed bodies engaged in hard labor, the sour smell of fierce sweat, the metallic tang of blood from various injuries. Someone behind you has already soiled themselves, whether from terror or dysentery you don't know and don't want to ask. The latrines are back at the main camp, which might as well be on the moon for all the good they do you now. A quirky detail from medieval siege accounts. Some commanders would have perfumes or incense burned near the trenches, supposedly to ward off disease humors, but really just to mask the unbearable stench. Your commander apparently doesn't believe in such luxuries. You get raw reality, unfiltered and unpleasant. The castle defenders have figured out the rhythm of your work, and they're adjusting their tactics. Instead of constant harassment, they're timing their volleys for maximum psychological impact. You'll have 10, maybe 15 minutes of relative quiet, long enough to relax slightly, to think maybe it's not so bad. Then a sudden flurry of crossbow bolts and stones, a concentrated burst designed to catch men when their guard is down. It's working. You watch a man stand up just enough to stretch his cramping back and take a bolt through the shoulder. He's pulled down by his companions, and the trench fills with his muffled screaming. The walls keep collapsing. You've given up trying to maintain them properly and instead focus on just moving dirt, any dirt, from in front of you to behind you. The trench is becoming less an engineered fortification and more an organic wound in the earth. raw and irregular and barely functional. As afternoon wears on, you realize the trench is also becoming a tomb for abandoned equipment. Broken tools litter the bottom, half buried in mud. Someone's lost a boot, sucked off by the muck, and it sits there like a sad memorial. There are arrows embedded in the walls, spent crossbow bolts, pieces of shattered siege stones. The earth is consuming all of it, slowly pulling it down into the muck. You're standing well, crouching in what's supposed to be sophisticated military engineering, a cutting-edge siege technique that's been refined over centuries of warfare. What you actually inhabit is barely controlled chaos. A trench that's collapsing as fast as you can dig it, offering dubious protection while demanding maximum effort. This is your home now, this festering wound in the ground, this collective grave that you're all desperately trying to avoid dying in. Welcome to medieval siege warfare, where the trench itself might kill you before the enemy gets a chance. The sergeant returns with what he announces as proper equipment, and your heart sinks when you see what he's dragging. It's armor. Specifically, it's a collection of mismatched pieces that look like they were scraped together from a dozen different corpses, which they probably were. Medieval armies didn't waste perfectly good metal just because the previous owner had an unfortunate encounter with a mace. Right then, the sergeant says, dropping the pile with a clatter that makes everyone wince. Noise draws attention, and attention draws arrows. Commands decided we need armored men at the front of the dig. You lot look healthy enough, so congratulations. He starts distributing pieces with the casual indifference of someone who won't be wearing any of it. You get a gambeson first, which sounds impressive until you realize it's essentially a quilted jacket stuffed with wool or linen. This particular specimen has seen better days. It's stained with substances you don't want to identify, torn in several places, and smells like it's been marinating in a barn for several months. But it's padded armor, the foundation upon which everything else sits, so you strip off your outer layer and wrestle it on. Immediately, you're sweating. It's not even particularly warm today, but the gambeson is designed to be insulating all those layers of fabric trap heat like a personal prison. Within minutes, you feel sweat trickling down your spine, pooling in places you'd rather it didn't. And you haven't even added the metal yet. Next comes a mail shirt, what historians call a hauberk when they're feeling fancy. This one falls to about mid-thigh and weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 pounds. The sergeant helps you pull it over your head, and the moment it settles onto your shoulders, your entire body registers a formal complaint. 30 pounds doesn't sound like much until it's distributed across your upper body in a way that makes every movement an effort. The mail itself is a mix of riveted and solid rings, probably manufactured in different places, possibly different decades. Some sections are bright and well-maintained. Others are rusty and look like they might crumble if you breathe on them wrong. There's a patch on the left side where someone has repaired it with slightly different gauge rings, creating a weak point that you're acutely aware of. You can literally see where the previous owner took a hither's a cluster of broken rings right over where the liver would be. Don't worry about that, the sergeant says, noticing your examination. If they hit you there, the mail's the least of your problems. Comforting. The mail hangs heavy, the weight pulling at your shoulders, compressing your spine in a way that makes you feel like you're shrinking. You try to adjust it, to distribute the weight more evenly, but there's no good way to wear 30 pounds of metal rings. It's going to hurt, and it's going to keep hurting, and eventually you'll just get used to the pain. Over the mail goes a Surcoda cloth garment that's supposed to identify your allegiance and also keep the sun from turning your mail into a cooking surface. This one is faded to the point where whatever heraldry it once displayed is now just a vague suggestion of color. Could be your lord's arms. Could be someone else's entirely. In the chaos of siege warfare, nobody's checking too carefully. Now for the extremities. You get mail shows for your legs, essentially metal stockings that tie to your belt and cover you from waist to ankle. They add another 15 pounds or so, distributed in the worst possible way. Your thighs now carry extra weight with every step, and your knees feel like they're supporting a building. Walking becomes a deliberate act, each movement requiring conscious effort. The gauntlets are a disaster. They're not even a matched pair. The left is mail and leather. The right is some kind of plate segments riveted to a glove. Neither fits properly. The left is too large, sliding around on your hand uselessly. The right is too small, pinching your fingers into a claw-like position. You try to make a fist and can't quite manage it. Holding your broken hoe is now an exercise in frustration. A helmet comes next. It's a basic kettle hat, a wide-brimmed iron affair that's designed to deflect strikes and shed rain. This one has an impressive dent on one side, suggesting it saved someone's life once. You're hoping it has another save left in it. The moment you pull it on, your field of vision narrows dramatically. The brim blocks your peripheral vision, and suddenly you can only see what's directly in front of you. Looking up at the castle requires tilting your entire body backward. But here's the real problem with the helmet. It turns your head into an oven. Your body heat, trapped by the gambeson and mail, rises upward and gets caught under the iron dome of the helmet. Within seconds, sweat is pouring down your face, stinging your eyes, dripping off your nose. You can't wipe it away because your gauntlets are metal and would probably just scratch your face open. The total weight of your equipment is somewhere around 60 to 70 pounds. That might not sound like much. It's less than many modern soldiers carry, but here's the difference. Modern equipment is ergonomically designed, with weight distributed across the body using advanced harness systems. Your medieval armor just hangs there, pulls at your shoulders, compresses your spine, chafes against your hips, and generally makes you feel like you're trying to work while wearing a very angry, very heavy ghost. You attempt to crouch back down into digging position, and your body stages a rebellion. The mail bunches up awkwardly at the waist, pinching skin and restricting movement. Your shoes pull tight against your knees, making it nearly impossible to bend your legs properly. The helmet's brim hits the parapet, forcing you to tilt your head at an unnatural angle. Your gauntlets make it impossible to grip your tool with any dexterity. Stop squirming and dig. The sergeant barks. The French don't care if your armor's uncomfortable. Easy for him to say. He's not the one trying to excavate hard clay while wearing what feels like a mobile prison. You swing your hoe or try to. The mail restricts your shoulder movement. The gauntlets reduce your grip strength. And the weight of everything means you can barely lift the tool above waist height. Your strike hits the trench wall with a pathetic thud, achieving roughly nothing. You try again, putting your back into it, and feel something in your lower spine make a concerning pop. Around you, other newly armored men are having similar struggles. One poor soul has been given a full enclosed helmet that covers the entire head. He's gasping for breath, the sound echoing metallically from inside his iron prison, and you can see him starting to panic as he realizes he can't get enough air. Someone helps him wrench it off before he passes out, and his face is an alarming shade of red. sweat pouring down like he's been dunked in water. Here's a fun historical fact. Heat exhaustion killed more medieval soldiers than many battles. Wearing armor in any kind of warm weather was a quick route to collapse. And commanders often had to schedule attacks for cooler parts of the day just to keep their armored troops conscious. You're learning this lesson in real time as your vision starts to blur at the edges and your breathing becomes labored. The farmer next to you, also freshly armored, looks over with sympathy. First time in mail? You nod, not trusting yourself to speak without gasping. It doesn't get better, he says cheerfully. You just get more tired. Eventually you're too exhausted to notice the pain. Another comforting thought. A crossbow bolt hits the parapet near you, and instinctively you try to duck. The armor has other ideas. 60 pounds of metal and padding doesn't change direction quickly. You end up in an awkward half-crouch. Your mail shirt riding up to expose your lower back. Your helmet sliding forward to blind you, and your shoes pulling tight enough that you're genuinely concerned about permanent damage to your future children. You scramble back into position, making a noise that's half grunt, half whimper, and absolutely not the sound of a warrior ready for glorious combat. The sergeant appears again, surveying his newly armored crew with the expression of a man who's seen this comedy before. Weapons, he announces, and starts distributing those too. You get a spear, not a knightly lance, not even a proper man-at-arms polearm, but a simple ash shaft with an iron point, the kind of weapon that's been issued to reluctant soldiers since humans first figured out that pointy sticks were useful. It's about 8 feet long, which means it's completely useless in the confines of the trench. You can't swing it, can't maneuver it, can barely hold it without hitting 3 other men. That's for when they counterattack. The sergeant explains. When the French come boiling out of that castle to clear us out of these trenches, you'll be glad for the reach. When, not if, you file that away under things to have nightmares about. Someone else gets a sword, which sounds better until you realize it's a single-handed arming sword, and he's also wearing gauntlets that make it nearly impossible to draw from the scabbard. He struggles with it for a full minute, the blade catching on the metal-reinforced mouth of the sheath, before finally wrenching it free with enough force to nearly stab himself in the foot. The weight of the spear adds another 5 pounds to your burden. It's not much, but combined with everything else, it's the difference between barely mobile and completely immobilized. You try to plant it in the ground so you can use both hands for digging, but the trench floor is so churned up that it just falls over, nearly braining the man next to you. Historians still argue whether medieval common soldiers were actually expected to fight in full armor while performing siege duties, or if armor was reserved for actual combat situations. Your current experience suggests that someone, somewhere, made a very poor decision about when to armor up. You attempt to dig again, this time with the full understanding that you're essentially fighting 2 battles. One against the French defenders, and one against your own equipment. Every movement is a negotiation with 60-plus pounds of metal that really doesn't want to cooperate. Your tool swings are weak, your range of motion is restricted, and you're breathing like you've run a mile uphill. Sweat is now pouring off you in quantities you didn't think your body could produce. It runs down inside your gambeson, making the padding squelch with every movement. It pools inside your gauntlets, making your hands slip. It streams down your face and into your eyes, blinding you with salt sting. The helmet has become a collection device for your own fluids, and you can actually hear sloshing when you turn your head. And the chafing. Oh, the chafing. The mail rings catch on the gambeson fabric, creating friction points that feel like they're sanding your skin off. Your shoulders, where the mail's weight concentrates, are developing raw spots. Your hips, where the shows tie to your belt, are being rubbed with every movement. There are parts of your body currently being abraded that you've never even thought about before. A quirky medieval detail. Soldiers would sometimes stuff additional padding rags, grass, even moss into their armor to reduce chafing. You don't have any extra padding. You just have pain, sweat, and the growing certainty that whoever designed this equipment hated the human body. The French, observing your struggles, seem to find it entertaining. You swear you can hear laughter from the castle walls as your group of newly armored men fumbles around like drunken tortoises. They're not even shooting at you anymore. Why waste arrows when you're basically immobilizing yourselves? You finally manage to dig out a few scoops of clay, each one requiring so much effort that you're genuinely considering whether death by crossbow bolt might be preferable to continuing. Your back is screaming. Your shoulders are on fire. Your hands are torn up inside the gauntlets, and you're pretty sure you're developing heat stroke. This is the reality of medieval warfare that the songs never mention. Not the glorious clash of arms, but the grinding misery of trying to perform physical labor while wearing equipment that seems designed to make every task as difficult as possible. You're not a warrior right now. You're a very tired, very hot, very uncomfortable person who's starting to understand why medieval soldiers had such creative vocabulary for describing their equipment. The armor that's supposed to save your life is currently making you wish you'd never been born. 3 hours pass, then 4. Then you lose track entirely because time has ceased to have meaning in the trench. There's only the endless cycle of crouch in mud. Wait, listen for incoming projectiles. Wait some more. Shift position because your legs are cramping. Wait, wonder if the enemy has forgotten about you. Wait, remember they haven't when a crossbow bolt thuds into the parapet. This is the part of medieval siege warfare that breaks men faster than any battle the waiting. Not the glorious anticipation before a cavalry charge, but the soul-crushing tedium of sitting in a hole, doing nothing, while simultaneously being terrified that at any moment you might die. Your armor, which was unbearable during the digging, has now settled into a new category of torment during the stillness. At least when you were working, the discomfort was distributed, your attention divided between the pain and the task. Now, motionless, you have nothing to do but catalog every single point where metal meets flesh, where fabric bunches, where sweat has created new and interesting skin conditions. The farmer next to you has developed a 1,000-yard stare, looking at nothing in particular. You know what the worst part is? He says suddenly, his voice flat. You grunt, which he takes as invitation to continue. It's that nothing's happening. We're not advancing. We're not retreating. We're just here. And my farm's probably being managed by my idiot brother-in-law who doesn't know a plow from a pike. And I'm missing harvest season. And for what? To sit in the mud outside a castle that doesn't even belong to anyone I know. Fighting for a lord I've seen once. In service to a king I've never met. It's the most words you've heard him string together, and they hang in the air like an accusation against the entire feudal system. Another man, younger, maybe 16, speaks up from further down the trench. Mida said sieges were the easy part, said you just sit around until they surrender or starve, then you go home. Nobody mentioned. He gestures vaguely at everything. This. You're delighted. Someone else responds. Or he was never at a siege. Or he was trying to make you feel better about being called up. The conversation dies there, because what else is there to say? You're all trapped in this muddy purgatory, and complaining about it won't change anything. You try to find a comfortable position, which is hilarious because comfort left your vocabulary the moment you put on mail. Sitting is agony on your lower back. Crouching makes your knees scream. Standing makes you a target. You settle for an awkward half-lean against the trench wall, which immediately starts to give way under your armored weight, forcing you to redistribute before you bring the whole section down. Your stomach announces its displeasure with a growl that sounds like a small beast dying. You haven't eaten since before dawn some kind of grain porridge that was mostly water and optimism. Rations have been promised, but promised and delivered are very different things in medieval military logistics. As if summoned by your hunger, a runner appears with what passes for food. It's bread, technically. Rock-hard trencher bread that's probably been sitting in a supply wagon for weeks, possibly months. You get a chunk about the size of your fist, and when you try to bite into it, you genuinely worry about your teeth. The bread has the consistency of wood and tastes like it was made by someone who had heard about grain but never actually seen it. You're also handed a small piece of cheese that's more ambition than dairy at this point. Sweating in the heat, giving off a smell that makes you nostalgic for the trench's usual odors. You eat it anyway because who knows when the next meal will arrive. Water comes in a shared skin that's passed down the line. By the time it reaches you, it's warm, tastes like leather and other men's mouths, and probably contains enough foreign matter to qualify as soup. You drink deeply anyway, because dehydration in armor is a death sentence. And at least this is wet. The act of eating while wearing gauntlets is a special kind of comedy. You can't grip the bread properly, can't bring it to your mouth with any precision. You end up mashing it against your face through the gap in your helmet, getting crumbs in your mail, and generally looking like an infant learning to feed itself. A philosophical observation occurs to you. Medieval siege warfare is essentially paying for the privilege of being uncomfortable in new and creative ways. You could be uncomfortable at home. Your bed isn't great. Your house leaks. Winter is always miserable. But at least there, you're uncomfortable in familiar ways. Here, you're discovering entirely new categories of human suffering. The young soldier starts crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears running down his face, which somehow makes it worse. Nobody comments on it. Crying seems reasonable. You're all probably one minor discomfort away from joining him. How long do sieges usually last? Someone asks the sergeant, who's returned to check on his charges. The sergeant shrugs, a gesture made awkward by his own armor. Depends. Few weeks if they're smart and surrender. Few months if they're stubborn. Chateau Gallard held for a year once, though that was exceptional. Ended when they ran out of food and started eating the horses. Then the dogs. Then he trails off meaningfully. You don't want to think about then. We were told this would be over quickly. Another voice protests. 3 days of bombardment, they said. Walls would crack, they said. The sergeant laughs, a harsh sound. And you believed them? Those walls are 12 feet thick in places. Our trebuchets might as well be throwing pebbles. No, lads, we're here for the duration. Best get comfortable. Comfortable. In a collapsing trench, wearing 60 pounds of metal, being shot at sporadically, eating bread that could double as a building material. Sure, comfortable. The boredom is becoming physically painful. Your mind, desperate for stimulation, starts focusing on individual discomforts with excruciating detail. There's a mail ring digging into your left shoulder blade. You can feel its exact shape. Could probably draw it from memory. Your right gauntlet has a rough edge that's been scratching the same spot on your wrist for hours, and you're fairly certain it's drawn blood. The padding in your gambeson has shifted under your right arm, creating a bunched-up mass that's like having a small, soggy animal trapped in your armpit. Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers developed psychological trauma from sieges similar to what we'd now recognize as PTSD. From your current position, you're thinking the answer is absolutely, and possibly they developed entirely new mental illnesses that haven't been named yet. A fly lands on your face. You can't swat it because your gauntlets would probably break your nose. It crawls across your cheek, exploring, and all you can do is blow at it ineffectually. It doesn't budge. It's joined by another fly, then 3 more. Apparently, the combination of sweat, blood, and general misery makes you irresistible to insects. The French seem to have settled into their own rhythm. Every hour or so, they send over a desultory volley of crossbow bolts, just to keep you honest. It's not even a serious attempt to kill anyone, Anna Marie. It's more like they're punching a time card. Yes, we're still here. Yes, we're still hostile. No, we haven't forgotten about you. Between volleys, you can actually hear life continuing inside the castle. Voices carry on the wind, someone shouting orders. What might be laughter, the clang of metal on metal that could be anything from weapon maintenance to a blacksmith working. They're having a significantly better day than you are. Your bladder, which you've been ignoring with increasing difficulty, finally demands attention. This creates a new problem. There are no latrines in the trench. The official latrines are back at the main camp. A good 5-minute walk across open ground that's covered by enemy archers. Nobody's making that journey during daylight. The solution is as medieval as it is undignified. There's a section of trench designated as the piss corner, which is exactly what it sounds like. You wade down there, and wade is the operative word, because the trench floor is now several inches deep in a mixture you're trying very hard not to analyze and add your contribution to the general misery. The smell in this section is transcendent. It's moved beyond ordinary bad smell into something almost metaphysical, an odor so profound that it seems to have weight and presence. Your eyes water. Your throat constricts. You're breathing through your mouth, which is a mistake because now you can taste it. Returning to your position, you're actually grateful for the regular trench smell, which seemed unbearable an hour ago but now feels almost refreshing by comparison. The young soldier has stopped crying and has instead entered a kind of fugue state, staring at the trench wall like it holds the secrets of the universe. The farmer is systematically removing and replacing individual pieces of his armor, trying to find some configuration that doesn't cause immediate pain. He won't find it, you know, because you've already tried every possible arrangement, but the attempt gives him something to do. Another piece of bread makes the rounds, this one somehow even harder than the last. You wonder if the supply corps is actively trying to find the least edible food possible, or if this is just what happens when you try to feed an army in the field. Medieval military logistics is basically a series of increasingly desperate attempts to stop soldiers from starving, with palatability falling somewhere below technically digestible on the list of priorities. A thought strikes you with horrible clarity. This is only day 1. One single day of siege warfare, and you're already mentally composing goodbye letters you'll never be able to write because you can't write. How do men do this for weeks? Months? The answer, you're beginning to suspect, is that they don't. Not really. They endure until they break, and then they keep going because the alternative is death. The human capacity for suffering, turns out, is almost unlimited when all the other options are worse. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would be beautiful if you weren't experiencing them from the bottom of a medieval hellhole. The temperature drops, which should be a relief but isn't, because now the sweat that's soaked through all your layers is turning cold against your skin. You shift position for the 1000th time, seeking the comfort that doesn't exist, and settle in for what you know will be a sleepless night. Because night in the trenches, you're about to discover, makes the daytime waiting seem positively pleasant by comparison. The boredom hasn't killed you. The fear hasn't killed you. The discomfort hasn't killed you. But the combination might yet succeed where the French have failed. Night falls, and with it comes a new particular terror you hadn't even considered. The ground beneath you is actively trying to kill you. You first notice it as a sound, a low, rhythmic thudding that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. First, you think it's your own heartbeat, amplified by exhaustion and fear. Then you realize it's too regular, too deliberate. It's coming from below. They're mining, the sergeant says quietly, appearing like a ghost in the darkness. His voice carries that special flatness of a man delivering very bad news. Started about an hour ago, probably aiming to collapse this whole section of trench by morning. Mining, undermining, sapping. Different words for the same nightmare. Enemy engineers are tunneling beneath your position, planning to either collapse the ground under your feet or pack the tunnel with combustibles and literally explode you out of your hole. The farmer's hands are shaking as he presses them against the trench wall, feeling the vibrations. How deep? Deep enough that we can hear them, not deep enough that we can do anything about it. The sergeant sounds almost philosophical about your impending burial alive. Commands sent for counterminers, but they won't arrive until tomorrow at earliest. So tonight, you get to sit here and listen to the French dig your grave. There's something uniquely horrifying about this form of warfare. At least with arrows and stones, you can see death coming. You can duck, dodge, maybe get lucky. But mining, the earth itself becomes your enemy. Every vibration could be the last warning before the ground opens up and swallows you whole. You press your ear to the trench wall, trying to gauge the distance. The sound is clearer here, definitely picks or mattocks striking earth. The scrape of shovels, occasional muted voices speaking French. They're close, maybe 10 feet below, maybe 15. In the compact clay soil around this fortress. A tunnel can advance several feet per hour with a good crew. Here's a quirky detail from medieval siege chronicles. Some engineers would place bowls of water on the ground to detect mining operations, watching for ripples that indicated digging nearby. You don't have bowls. You have terror and imagination, which are somehow worse because they let you envision exactly how the collapse will happen, the sudden drop, the weight of earth crushing down, the suffocation in absolute darkness while armored and unable to dig yourself free. The thudding continues, relentless and rhythmic. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. It's like a heartbeat, but it's the heartbeat of your death, counting down in real time. Can't we dig down to them? Someone asks desperately. Fight them in the tunnels? The sergeant snorts. With what? Your broken hoe? Even if we had proper tools. Tunnel fighting is specialist work. You go down there blind, In the dark, in tight spaces where you can't swing a weapon, against men who know every inch of their own tunnel, you die, probably quickly, which would be the only mercy. So you wait. Again. Waiting seems to be the primary occupation of siege warfare, interspersed with brief moments of terror and longer stretches of grinding discomfort. The sounds from below continue. You start to distinguish different noises, the lighter tap-tap-tap, that's probably someone checking the tunnel ceiling for stability. The heavier thuds that mean they're breaking through harder soil. The scraping that's definitely shoveling. You're learning the rhythm of your own execution. Other men in the trench are having varying reactions. Some, like you, are frozen in place, listening with horrible fascination. Others are frantically trying to dig deeper into the trench walls, as if a few extra feet of earth will save them when the ground collapses. One man is praying loudly, running through every saint he can remember, making up a few new ones for good measure. The young soldier who was crying earlier has progressed to full panic. "We have to leave," he's saying, over and over. "We have to get out. We have to leave. They're going to kill us. We have to." "Shut it," the sergeant snaps, but not unkindly. "Leave and you'll hang. Stay and you might live. Those are your choices." But the ground. I know about the ground. Boy, we all know about the ground. And we're all staying put because those are our orders. And because running means death just as certain as staying, but with dishonor added on top. Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers fully understood the mechanics of mining warfare or whether the terror was amplified by not understanding exactly how they were being killed. From your current state of mind, you can confirm that understanding the mechanics does not reduce the terror even slightly. If anything, it makes it worse, because you can visualize the engineering, can imagine the tunnel advancing inch by inch, can calculate roughly when the collapse might come. A new sound joins the mining noisisa hollow booming, like someone striking a drum underground. Your blood freezes. "Counter mine," the sergeant says, and for the first time you hear relief in his voice. "Our boys have found their tunnel and they're trying to break through. Listen." The French mining sounds pause. Then they resume. Faster now, more urgent. They know they've been found, and it's become a race. Can they finish their tunnel and collapse it before the English counterminers break through? Can the English reach them in time to stop the collapse or at least engage them in tunnel combat? You're listening to an underground battle that you can't see, can't influence, can only sit above and hope the right side wins. The booming gets louder, more frequent. The French digging sounds frantic now. You hear shouting from below, muffled by earth but unmistakably panicked. Then a different sound, a crash, a roar of voices, the ring of metal on metal echoing up through the soil. They've met, somewhere beneath your feet, in absolute darkness, in tunnels barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. Soldiers are killing each other with knives and short swords and probably their bare hands. This brutal, claustrophobic warfare that makes your surface misery seem almost pleasant by comparison. The sounds of combat are brief and vicious, screaming you can't tell which nationality. A wet thudding that might be bodies falling. Then silence. The silence is somehow worse than the noise. You don't know who won. You don't know if the tunnel is about to collapse or if it's been secured. You don't know anything except that men just died in the dark below you, and you might be about to join them. Minutes pass. The thudding doesn't resume. No collapse comes. Slowly, cautiously, you allow yourself to believe you might survive the night. Then you hear a new sound from a different direction. More mining. They've started a second tunnel. Of course they have. The farmer mutters. Why stop at one when you can dig two? Or three? Or a whole bloody network under us? He's not wrong. Medieval siege mining wasn't a single operation, it was often a web of tunnels and counter-tunnels, an entire invisible war happening beneath the visible one. The ground under any siege could be hollowed out like cheese, riddled with passages where men fought and died where no one above would ever see them. You try to imagine the tunnel system growing beneath you, the French digging approach tunnels, the English digging countermines, both sides listening for each other, the whole thing like a deadly game of blindfolded tag played in the earth. Some of those tunnels will collapse naturally. Some will be deliberately caved in. Some will remain forgotten until centuries later, when some unsuspecting person's cellar suddenly opens into a medieval mine shaft. The second tunnel sounds are more distant, which is either reassuring or means they're taking a different approach. Maybe this one's aimed at the first parallel behind you. Maybe it's going under the castle walls to collapse them from below. Maybe it's just going to sit there, packed with brushwood and animal fat, waiting for someone to light it and turn the ground into a crater. You can't do anything about it. That's the maddening part. You can't fight tunnel miners. You can't defend against an enemy you can't see. You can only sit here, in your armor that's now cold and clammy against your skin, listening to your potential death being excavated one shovelful at a time. A runner comes with news that's not really news. Command says hold position. Counterminers are being deployed to all sectors. No one is to abandon their post. As if you needed the reminder. As if any of you were entertaining fantasies of escape while the earth itself plots your demise. The night drags on. The mining sounds continue, sometimes close, sometimes distant, sometimes multiple locations at once. It's like the ground has become a living thing, hostile and hungry, actively working to consume you. You think about your village, your family, your life before some lord decided his territorial dispute required your presence in this hole. You think about fields that needed plowing, repairs that needed making, a life that was hard but at least didn't involve sitting on top of enemy tunnels waiting for the earth to open up. The farmer's voice cuts through your reverie. You know what's mad? The French lads digging those tunnels. They're probably just like us. Conscripted farmers, tradesmen, poor bastards who'd rather be anywhere else. And here we are, them trying to bury us trying to stop them, all because some nobles had a disagreement over who owns what. It's too philosophical for the trenches, but he's not wrong. Somewhere below, French miners are doing brutal, dangerous work, risking collapse and counterminers and tunnel combat, all in service of killing you, and you bear them no particular malice. You'd probably buy them a drink if you met in peacetime. But this isn't peacetime. This is siege warfare, where the ground itself becomes a weapon, where death can come from below as easily as from above, where even standing still means sitting atop your own grave while someone else digs it. The thudding continues. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. The rhythm of medieval mining, the sound of expertise applied to murder, the heartbeat of siege warfare's hidden war. You settle in for a sleepless night, knowing that even if you survive until dawn, the tunnels will still be there, still advancing, still threatening. The battle above ground might pause for night. The battle below never stops. Welcome to the real terror of medieval siege warfare, the enemy you can't see. fighting a war you can't join, with your life hanging on the outcome of battles fought in darkness beneath your feet. Dawn breaks, and with it comes the order you've been dreading. Prepare to advance. The sergeant appears through the morning mist looking like he hasn't slept either, which is mildly comforting. At least the suffering is universal. Right? You lucky lads. Command's decided the tunnels are stable enough. The castle's distracted enough. And we're expendable enough to make a push for the outer wall. We're going over the top. Over the top. Such a simple phrase for such a monumentally stupid idea. You peer over the parapet at the ground you'll need to cross. It's roughly 80 yards of open space between your trench and the castle's outer defensive wall. 80 yards that have been carefully cleared by the defendersno trees. No bushes, no cover of any kind. Just flat, slightly muddy ground that's been deliberately turned into a killing field. The outer wall isn't even the main fortress wall. It's a lower defensive barrier, maybe 10 feet high, designed specifically to force attackers into situations exactly like this. Take it, and you'll still be faced with the real walls behind it. Fail to take it, and you'll die in the open. These are your options. Ladders are coming up. The sergeant continues, as if discussing farming equipment rather than implements of suicide. 4-man teams. You carry them forward, plant them against the wall, climb, and secure the position. Simple. Simple, right? You'll be carrying a wooden ladder probably 20 feet long and weighing a solid 100 pounds across 80 yards of open ground while people actively try to kill you. Then you'll prop it against a wall and climb up it, completely exposed, hoping the defenders don't just push it over backward. Simple. The ladders arrive, passed forward from the rear trenches. They're crude things, clearly constructed in a hurry from whatever timber was available. The rungs are unevenly spaced, some wider than others. The wood is green in places, meaning it's heavier than it should be and likely to splinter under stress. Medieval siege ladders weren't precision equipment, they were disposable tools that needed to work exactly once. You're assigned to a ladder team with 3 other men, none of whom look any happier about this than you are. The ladder settles onto your shoulders, you get a forward position, which means you'll bear slightly less weight but will be first to reach the wall. This is not the blessing it might seem. On my signal, the sergeant says, "You run. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't think. Just run." The archers will suppress the walls, but they can't stop everything. Some of you will make it. Some won't. That's siege warfare. Comforting as always. You crouch in the trench, the ladder balanced awkwardly on your shoulder and the shoulders of the 3 men behind you. Your armor, which was torturous when sitting still, is about to become potentially lethal when running. 60 pounds of metal doesn't care about your need for speed or agility. It's going to slow you down, tire you out, and possibly cause you to trip and fall at the exact moment that hesitation means death. The French have noticed something's happening. You can see increased movement on the walls, defenders gathering, crossbows being loaded. They know what's coming. They've seen this before probably many times. They know exactly how to kill men carrying ladders. A quirky detail from siege warfare manuals. Some medieval commanders would send dummy assault teams first, carrying fake ladders or just running forward to draw fire and waste enemy ammunition. You desperately hope you're not the dummy assault. You suspect you might be. The sergeant raises his hand. English archers behind you draw their bows. You can hear the creak of wood, the slight whistle as hundreds of arrows are nocked. There's a moment of perfect silence. That strange calm before violence, where the whole world seems to hold its breath. Then the hand drops. Go! You explode forward, out of the trench and onto open ground, and immediately understand why this is called the killing ground. The moment you clear the parapet, you're visible, and every defender on that wall can see you. More importantly, they can shoot at you. The ladder bounces on your shoulder with each step, its weight trying to throw you off balance. Your armor restricts your stride, prevents you from running properly. You're not running jury doing this awful shuffling jog that's maybe half your normal speed, weighted down and awkward and making yourself the easiest target imaginable. Arrows start falling. The English archers are sending volleys at the walls, trying to make the defenders keep their heads down. It's partially working, but partially means some defenders are still shooting, and their targets are running in relatively straight lines carrying large wooden objects. An arrow hits the ground 3 feet to your left, sticking upright in the mud. Another whizzes past your head with a sound like angry wasps. A crossbow bolt you can tell by the heavier, flatter trajectory punches into the ground right where your foot is about to land. You adjust mid-step, nearly twisting your ankle. The man behind you on the ladder team screams. You don't look back, can't look back, but you feel the ladder suddenly get heavier as his weight shifts. He's been hit, but he's still moving, still pushing the ladder forward, and you have no choice but to keep running. 40 yards to go. You're breathing in huge gasps, your lungs burning from the effort of running in armor. Sweat is already pouring into your eyes. Your legs are screaming. The ladder feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. A stone from some siege engine crashes down to your right, throwing up a gout of mud and grass. It's not aimed press a silicant B. At this range and speed, but it doesn't need to be. The impact zone is huge. If you're anywhere near it, the concussion alone might kill you. 30 yards. You can see the wall clearly now, can see the defenders on top. One is leveling a crossbow directly at you. Time slows down in that weird way it does during crisis. You can see his face, see him squinting as he aims, see his finger on the trigger. You try to dodge, but you can't. Not really. The ladder prevents any sudden movement. Your armor prevents any quick reaction. You're committed to your course, and if he's a decent shot, you're about to die. The crossbow releases. You feel rather than see the bolt pass a disturbance in the air next to your head, so close that it actually tugs at your helmet. Then it's past, and you're still alive, still moving. 20 yards. Another man in a different team goes down, an arrow through his thigh. His team stumbles, the ladder tilting dangerously, and they make the fatal decision to stop and help him. A second arrow takes one of them in the chest. A third hits the wounded man in the neck. The ladder falls, and the survivors flee back toward the trench. 10 yards. This is where it gets truly suicidal. You're close enough now that the defenders can't miss. They're shooting almost straight down, and gravity does most of the aiming work for them. An arrow hits your shoulder and bounces off the millet was a glancing blow. Not enough force to penetrate, but it feels like being hit with a hammer. Your whole left side goes numb. 5 yards. You reach the wall and slam the ladder against it, and this is the moment of truth. The angle needs to be right, too steep and it'll fall backward. Too shallow and you can't climb it. Your team gets it roughly correct through sheer luck and desperation. Climb. Someone screams, might be you, might be the sergeant, might be God himself for all you know. You grab a rung and start climbing, and this is where the armor truly becomes your enemy. Each step up requires hauling 60 pounds of metal against gravity. Your arms are already exhausted from the run. Your hands, slick with sweat inside the gauntlets, can barely grip the rough wood. You're 3 rungs up when you see the defender lean over the wall directly above you. He's got a rock, just a simple rock, maybe the size of a melon, and he drops it. You press yourself flat against the ladder, and the rock grazes your back, hitting hard enough to dent your mail but not hard enough to knock you off. You keep climbing, 5 rungs up. Halfway there, you can hear the man behind you climbing, can hear other teams at other ladders screaming and dying and fighting. The whole wall has become a vertical battlefield where height is everything and you're on the wrong side of it. A spear jabs down from above, aiming for your face. You twist your head and it scrapes across your helmet with a screech of metal on metal. The defender draws back for another strike, and you know you're about to die on this ladder, pinned like an insect. Then an English arrow takes the spearman in the shoulder and he stumbles back from the wall. You take the opportunity to climb faster, ignoring the burning in your arms, the weight of your armor, the absolute certainty that this is the stupidest thing you've ever done. 3 rungs from the top. 2 rungs. 1 rung. You reach the top of the ladder and grab for the wall's edge, hauling yourself up with strength you didn't know you still had. Your armor scrapes against stone as you roll over the parapet and drop onto the wall. Walk a narrow platform about 4 feet wide, now containing you, 2 surprised French defenders, and about to contain a lot of violence. The first defender swings at you with a short sword. You don't have time to draw a weapon. You're still getting your balance, still trying to stand in armor on a platform that's barely wider than you are. So you do the only thing you can, you punch him. Your gauntlet fist hits him in the face with the full weight of metal behind it. He drops like a stone, probably dead or at least very unconscious. The second defender backs away, looking for room to swing his weapon, and backs right into another English soldier who's just topped a different ladder. Suddenly there are English troops pouring onto the wall. Your ladder teamer, what's left of itis, climbing up behind you. Other ladders have succeeded. The outer wall, improbably, impossibly, is being taken. But this isn't victory. This isn't even close to victory. This is just the first barrier. And behind it lies the real fortress. And you're standing on a narrow wall walk surrounded by enemies, with a castle full of fresh defenders about to come boiling out to retake what you've just barely captured. Historians still argue whether frontal assaults like this were ever truly successful, or if they were simply bloody failures that occasionally happened to work through sheer numerical advantage. Standing here, gasping for breath, your body screaming from exertion, watching more defenders rush toward your position, you're thinking bloody failure is the more accurate description. The sergeant appears on the wall beside you, somehow having survived the climb. Hold this position, he screams over the chaos. Reinforcements are coming. You want to ask what reinforcements. You want to ask how you're supposed to hold a 4-foot-wide platform against an entire castle. You want to ask a lot of things. But you're out of breath, out of strength, and out of options. So you draw your sword with shaking hands, plant your feet on blood-slicked stone, and prepare to discover whether you'll survive the next 5 minutes. The assault wave has broken against the wall. Now comes the brutal part: holding what you've taken. You've been on the wall for maybe 10 minutes when you feel a sharp, burning sensation along your left forearm. In the chaos of holding the wall walk against counterattacking defenders, you didn't even notice when it happened. Maybe it was a glancing sword strike. Maybe it was a dagger you didn't see. Maybe it was just scraping against rough stone while grappling with an enemy. Doesn't matter. What matters is that when you look down, you can see blood seeping through a tear in your mail sleeve. It's not a dramatic wound. No spurting arteries. No exposed bone. Just a slice maybe 3 inches long. Deep enough to bleed freely but not deep enough to incapacitate. In a modern context, you'd get some stitches, some antibiotics, maybe a tetanus shot, and you'd be fine in a week. In medieval siege warfare, you've just received a potential death sentence. But you don't know that yet. Right now, you're still fighting, still holding your section of wall against defenders who very much want it back. The wound burns and bleeds and generally makes holding your sword more difficult. But adrenaline is doing its job, keeping the pain manageable, keeping you functional. The English managed to secure a section of the outer wall about 30 yards of wall walk, enough to establish a foothold. Defenders have retreated to the inner fortress, and there's a lull in the fighting. You slump against the parapet, exhausted beyond anything you've experienced, and that's when you really notice the wound. The mail rings around the cut are bent inward, driven into the flesh by whatever struck you. Blood is flowing steadily now, soaking into your gambeson sleeve, dripping off your gauntlet. You need to do something about this. But field medicine in 1346 is a concept so terrifying that you almost consider just bleeding out as the preferable option. Gotta hurt one here. Someone calls, and before you can protest that you're finery not fine, but you'd rather not find out what passes for medical Korea man appears who's apparently serving as a field surgeon. He's not a doctor. Medieval armies rarely had actual physicians with the troops. Those stayed with the nobility, safely away from the fighting. This man is probably a barber surgeon, or more likely just someone who's watched enough injuries to have opinions about them. He's wearing an apron that's so stiff with dried blood it could probably stand up on its own. "Let's see it then," he says, already reaching for your arm. He peels back the mail sleeve, which hurts significantly more than getting the actual wound, and examines the cut with the professional interest of someone evaluating livestock. "Not bad," he announces. "Seen worse. Seen much worse. Just this morning, actually. Fellow took a crossbow bolt through the well. Never mind that. This we can handle." You're not reassured. From a bag that looks like it's seen service since the Crusades, he produces his tools. And by tools, you mean implements that look like they were designed for torturing confessions rather than healing. There's a needle that's roughly the size of a small nail. Thread that might be catgut or might be actual cat. You can't tell. And a jar of something that looks like it contains the physical manifestation of infection. "What's in the jar?" you ask, already dreading the answer. "Healing ointment," he says proudly. "Made it myself. Honey, some herbs, bit of wine, and some other ingredients. Secret recipe. Very effective." The other ingredients could be literally anything. Medieval medical theory held that all sorts of substances had healing properties. Some of them even worked. Honey, for instance, is actually a decent antibacterial agent. Others were less scientific. You've heard of wound treatments that included everything from spiderwebs to powdered gemstones to extracts made from Egyptian mummies. A quirky historical detail. Some medieval physicians believed that wounds healed better if treated with ointments made from substances that resembled the wound itself. Cut from a blade? Apply ground-up metal. Burned? Use ashes. The logic was medieval to its core, like cures like and medically worse than useless. "This might sting a bit," the surgeon says, which is medieval medical code for this is going to hurt worse than the original injury. He slathers the ointment directly into the wound, and sting doesn't begin to cover it. Feels like he's packed the cut with fire and broken glass. You bite down hard, refusing to scream, but a sound escapes anyway, something between a whimper and a growl. Good, good, he says, apparently interpreting your agony as a sign of the medicine working. That burning means it's fighting the bad humors. Humors, right? You're being treated according to medical theory that believes illness is caused by imbalances in bodily fluids, that infection is the result of bad air, and that the position of the stars during treatment can affect healing. The surgeon probably means well, but he's working with an understanding of medicine that's roughly equivalent to organized guessing. He threads his needle, doesn't bother cleaning it first. Why would he? And starts stitching. Medieval suturing technique is straightforward. Jab the needle through flesh on one side of the wound, pull it through flesh on the other side, tie it off. Repeat. No anesthetic beyond whatever alcohol you might have consumed. No concern for neat cosmetic results. Just functional closure of the wound. Each stitch is a fresh bolt of pain. Your vision blurs at the edges. You count them to distract yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 stitches to close a 3-inch wound, which means they're spaced generously apart. The wound isn't so much closed as roughly approximated. There we are, the surgeon announces, tying off the last stitch. Keep it clean, change the bandage daily, and you'll be fine. Probably. Probably? Well, could get infected, could fester, could turn putrid, and we'd have to take the arm off. But probably you'll be fine. He pats your shoulder reassuringly, leaving a bloody handprint on your surcoat. I've got good feelings about this one. His good feelings are worth precisely nothing, but there's no point saying so. He's already moving to the next wounded man, already reaching for his horrifying jar of ointment. You're left sitting against the wall, arm throbbing in rhythm with your heartbeat, watching as he treats other injuries with the same cheerful incompetence. A man with a head wound gets his scalp stitched up without anyone checking if his skull is fractured. Someone with an arrow still embedded in his leg gets the shaft pulled out with pliers, followed by generous application of the mystery ointment. No one seems concerned about leaving arrowheads in, or checking for internal bleeding, or any of the things you desperately want a real doctor to consider. Over the next few hours, your wound progresses from painful to extremely painful to, are you absolutely certain my arm isn't on fire? The stitches pull with every movement. The ointment continues to burn. Your gambeson sleeve, now soaked with blood and medical mystery substance, chafes against the injury with every breath. By evening, you notice the wound is weeping, producing a clear fluid that definitely wasn't there before. This could be normal healing. This could be the beginning of infection. You have no way to know, and asking would just get you more ointment, so you keep quiet. Night comes, and with it, fever. It's mild at first, just a slight warmth, a bit of chills. You tell yourself it's just exhaustion, just the aftermath of combat. But by midnight, you're shaking, your teeth chattering despite being wrapped in whatever blankets could be scrounged. The wound is hot to the touch, angry red spreading from the edges of the cut. Infection. The word echoes in your head like a death knell. Wound infection in medieval times is one of the most common killers, claiming more soldiers than actual combat. And why wouldn't it? The very concepts of germ theory and antisepsis won't exist for another 500 years. Every wound treatment is essentially rolling dice with death, hoping that whatever folk remedy is applied doesn't actively make things worse. The farmer from the trenches finds you shivering and curses. You're burning up. Need to get you to the surgeon. No. You manage through chattering teeth. He'll make it worse. Might do, might not, but doing nothing definitely won't help. He's right, much as you hate to admit it, so you're half-carried, half-dragged to where the surgeon has set up his field hospitala tent that smells like a charnel house decorated by someone who'd never heard of sanitation. The surgeon takes one look at your arm and nods knowingly. Infection. Thought you might be back. We'll need to drain it. Drain it. Those two words contain multitudes of horror. He produces a knife, not a surgical instrument. Just a knife. The kind you'd use to cut bread or gut a fish, and without preamble, without warning, he opens the wound wider to let the bad humors out. The pain is transcendent. You actually do scream this time, a raw sound that joins the chorus of other screaming men in the tent. He squeezes the wound, forcing out blood and pus and fluids you don't want to identify, all while explaining his medical philosophy. See, the body produces these evil humors when injured, he says, pressing harder, making you see stars. They build up, cause fever, cause death. We drain them out, apply more ointment, and the body's natural balance is restored. Historians still argue whether medieval medical practitioners were hindered more by their incorrect theories or by their enthusiastic application of those theories. Your vote is firmly for enthusiastic application, because even wrong theories wouldn't be so bad if people weren't so eager to cut, squeeze, and dose based on them. He packs the wound with what he claims is a fresh ointment, this one allegedly containing crushed pearls for their healing properties, though you suspect it's mostly just honey and wishful thinking. Then he wraps it in a bandage that was probably white once, several patients ago. There. Should heal up nicely now. Keep it wrapped, and if the fever doesn't break in 3 days, come back and we'll discuss amputation. Amputation. Discussed like it's a minor procedure, like removing a splinter rather than sawing off a limb with the same tools used to butcher livestock. You've seen medieval amputation, quick, brutal, with no anesthetic and a red-hot iron to cauterize the stump. The survival rate is roughly 50-50, and those who survive are left crippled in a world that has no place for the disabled. You stumble back to your position on the wall, fever raging, arm feeling like it contains molten lead. Around you, other men are experiencing similar progressions, minor wounds becoming major problems, routine treatments becoming death sentences. The man who took the arrow in the leg is dead by morning, fever and infection claiming him. The head wound case is babbling incoherently, clearly suffering from something the surgeon's stitches couldn't fix. Medieval battlefield medicine is less about healing and more about determining who's tough enough to survive despite the treatment. Your fever peaks on the second night. You're hallucinating, seeing things that aren't there, feeling the wall walk shift and move beneath you. The farmer sits with you, occasionally pouring water down your throat, preventing you from tumbling off the wall in your delirium. My brother died like this, he says quietly. Different siege, same story. Cut on his hand, smaller than yours, turned bad. Surgeon tried everything, draining, bleeding, even applied leeches to balance his humors. Nothing worked. Fever took him in 5 days. It's not a comforting story, but somehow his presence helps. Misery loves company, even when that company is just sharing tales of medical futility. By the third day, you're either getting better or you're dying. You can't tell which. The fever breaks, leaving you weak and soaked in sweat. The wound still looks angry, still weeps fluid, but the spreading redness has stopped advancing. Against all odds, despite medieval medicine's best efforts to kill you, you might actually survive. The surgeon examines you with something like surprise. Well then, you're tougher than you look. Keep changing the bandages. Keep it clean as you can, and try not to get any more wounds. My ointment can only do so much. Your arm will scar badly, the stitches were too far apart. The wound was reopened for draining. An infection has done its damage. But you'll keep the arm, keep your life, and gain a healthy appreciation for just how terrifying pre-modern medicine could be. A 3-inch cut nearly killed you. Not the enemy, not the siege. Just a minor wound and the primitive medical care that followed. Welcome to medieval warfare, where the battle is often the least dangerous part. Your fever has barely broken when you're summoned to the sergeant. This can't be good. Men in your condition are usually left to recover or die in peace. Being called forward means someone needs something from you, and in siege warfare, that something is never pleasant. The sergeant looks you over with the assessing eye of someone calculating whether you're fit for purpose. You can stand. You can hold a weapon. That makes you more useful than half the men we've got left. Report to the wall captain. The wall captain turns out to be a knight, an actual nobleman, which means he's never spoken to you before and likely considers you roughly equivalent to the mud on his boots. He's standing on the captured wall walk, surveying the inner fortress with the expression of someone who's just realized his brilliant plan has hit a significant obstacle. You, he says, pointing at you and 2 other men. You'll take first watch tonight. North corner, there. Any French attempt to retake this wall, you sound the alarm. Clear? Yes, my lord. The words come automatically. You've been trained since birth to defer to nobility, to accept their commands without question, to treat their word as law. He's already turned away, dismissing you from his attention as completely as if you'd ceased to exist. This is the reality of medieval military hierarchy, not a person to him. You're a function, a tool that can hold a spear and make noise when enemies appear. You make your way to the assigned position, your wounded arm throbbing with each step. The other 2 men assigned with you look equally worse, for where one has a bandaged head, the other is limping badly. This is what passes for fit for duty in siege warfare. You're conscious and can mostly walk. The north corner offers an excellent view of exactly how screwed you are. The outer wall you're standing on is maybe 10 feet high. The inner fortress wall behind it is 30 feet of solid stone with proper battlements, murder holes, and defenders who are fresh, well-fed, and not currently dying of infected wounds. Between the 2 walls is a killing ground even worse than the one you crossed to get Herites, called the Bailey, and it's been specifically designed to trap attackers who've taken the outer wall. We're bait, the man with the head wound says flatly. That's what this is. We're here so that when the French try to retake the outer wall, we'll scream loud enough to wake the camp before we die. He's not wrong. The outer wall position is indefensible if the French make a serious push from the inner fortress. You're too close to their main position, too far from English reinforcements, holding a position that's tactically insignificant except as an early warning system. And early warning systems, by definition, are the first to be overrun. How long is a watch? You ask, already knowing you won't like the answer. For hours, comes the response. Unless you're relieved early, which you won't be, because there's nobody to relieve you with. For hours of standing on a cold stone wall, staring at the fortress, waiting for an attack that might come at any moment. Your arm throbs, your fever might be gone, but the weakness remains. You feel hollow, like someone scooped out your insides and left just enough to keep you upright. Your armor, which you haven't removed since putting it on days ago, has become a second skin of metal and misery. The first hour passes in tense silence. Every sound from the fortress makes you jump, a door closing, voices calling, the clang of metal on metal. Any of it could be preparation for an attack. None of it is. Yet, the second hour brings a different kind of horror. A group of English soldiers, your supposed comrades, appear on the wall walk, and they're dragging something. Someone, actually, a man in English colors, hands bound, face bruised, caught him trying to desert. One of the soldiers announces to no one in particular, trying to slip away during the night, head back to the camp, probably planning to run all the way home. Desertion. The word hangs in the air like an executioner's blade. The wall captain appears, summoned by the commotion. He looks at the bound man with an expression of mild irritation, like someone's just presented him with a minor administrative problem. Was he beyond the perimeter? Yes, my lord. Definitely trying to flee. Right then. Punishment detail. 20 lashes. Then back to duty. Need to set an example, can't have the men thinking they can just walk away. 20 lashes. You've seen field punishments before. They're brutal, designed to hurt enough to deter others, but not so much that the victim can't return to service. In theory, in practice, men die from infected lash wounds almost as often as they die from combat. They tie the deserter to a post. There's one set up specifically for this purpose, which tells you exactly how common desertion attempts are, and strip his shirt. The first lash comes down with a crack that makes you flinch. The deserter screams. By the 5th lash, his back is a mess of blood. By the 10th, he's just whimpering. By the 20th, he's unconscious, held upright only by the ropes. Get him patched up and back on the wall. The captain orders, already walking away. And make sure everyone knows what happens to deserters. Bad for morale if men think they can just leave. Bad for morale. As if morale isn't already a corpse that's been dead for days and is just too stubborn to stop moving. They dump the unconscious deserter nearby. Your corner of the wall is apparently doubling as a recovery area for the punished, and he lies there, bleeding onto the stone. Nobody tends his wounds. Nobody offers water. He's been made an example of, and the example is, this is what happens when you prioritize your own survival over the Lord's objectives. The man with the head wound spits over the wall. That's Jeffrey, farmer, like most of us. Got 3 kids back home. Wife's probably managing the farm alone, wondering if he's dead. And he nearly makes it out, nearly gets back to them, and instead he gets whipped unconscious and left to bleed. Should have known better than to try, the limping man says, but there's no conviction in it. You can all see yourselves in Jeffrey. You've all thought about running. You know what the stupid thing is? Head wound continues. The Lord he's serving probably doesn't even know his name. Definitely doesn't know about his 3 kids. To the nobility, we're just numbers, bodies to throw at walls. And if we run, we're traitors. If we stay and die, we're heroes. Either way, we're dead and they're fine. The seditious talk, the kind that could get you whipped or worse. But there's no one important enough to hear it. Just 3 broken men on a cold wall, watching a 4th broken man bleed from punishment. A historical note. Medieval military discipline was remarkably harsh by modern standards, but also weirdly inconsistent. Nobles who failed in battle might be ransomed and released. Common soldiers who broke ranks might be executed on the spot. Desertion could mean death, or lashing, or a fine, depending entirely on who you were and who was judging you. The only consistency was that punishment always rolled downhill, and the bottom of the hill was littered with common soldiers' bodies. Your 3rd hour of watch is interrupted by a different sort of violence. A runner a purse theory always running, these messengers, as if speed will somehow protect them from arrows with new orders. Captain wants a prisoner for questioning. French prisoner, from the inner fortress, wants to know their strength, their supplies, their plans. The 3 of you look at each other. Then you look at the massive inner fortress wall, bristling with defenders. He wants us to go get a French soldier? You ask, certain you've misunderstood. Volunteer detail, the runner says, which is military speak for you're going whether you like it or not, but we'll pretend you have a choice. And if we refuse? The runner glances at Jeffrey, still unconscious and bleeding from his lashing. The message is clear. So you find yourself, wounded arm and all, planning what might be the stupidest military operation in a siege full of stupid operations. The plan, such as it is, wait for deep night, slip down from the outer wall into the bailey, somehow get close to the inner wall, grab a French soldier who's wandered too far from his friends, and drag him back. Simple. Suicidal, but simple. The limping man laughs. A sound with no humor in it. You know what's mad? We're English soldiers, ordered by an English captain, to capture a French soldier who's probably just like us, some poor bastard who'd rather be anywhere else. And if we succeed, they'll torture him for information he probably doesn't have. And if we fail, we'll die. And none of it matters because the siege will end when it ends, whether we get this prisoner or not. He's right, but right doesn't change orders. Orders come from nobility, flow down through ranks, and land on you like stones from a trebuchet. You can't dodge them, can't deflect them, can't refuse them without becoming the next example. Historians still argue whether medieval common soldiers felt genuine loyalty to their lords or simply complied out of fear and lack of options. Sitting here, planning to risk your life on a pointless prisoner grab because refusal means punishment, you can definitively answer, it's fear. It's always been fear. The entire hierarchy runs on it: fear of punishment, fear of shame, fear of execution, fear of being made an example. You check your weapons with shaking hands. Your sword is dull, you haven't had time or materials to sharpen it properly. Your dagger is better, but still not great. Your armor is damaged in places from the assault. You're wounded, weak, and about to attempt something that would be challenging for fresh, healthy troops. Jeffrey regains consciousness with a groan. His back is a ruin, but he's awake, which means he can be put back to work. Someone throws him a shirt that sticks to his wounds, which will make removal later absolute agony, and tells him to get up. He struggles to his feet, swaying, clearly not fit for any duty, but he's conscious and armed, which in siege warfare mathematics equals combat ready. Lucky you, the head wound man says to Jeffrey. You get to join our suicide mission. Captain wants a prisoner. Jeffrey looks at us with eyes that have gone somewhere beyond despair. Right? He says. Why not? Can't get worse than it already is. He's wrong. Of course. Can always get worse. As full night falls and you prepare to descend into the Bailey on your prisoner-hunting expedition, you reflect on the beautiful simplicity of medieval military hierarchy. Nobles make plans, lesser nobles give orders, and you die implementing them. Your life, your safety, your basic human dignity, none of it factors into the equation. You're a tool, and tools don't get to complain about how they're used. The deserter beside you tried to escape this system and got 20 lashes for his trouble. You're staying in the system and getting ordered to probable death. Either way, the common soldier loses. Welcome to medieval military structure, where the chain of command is really just a chain, and you're at the end of it, being dragged wherever the people above decide you should go. Night settles over the siege lines like a burial shroud, and with it comes a darkness so complete it feels tangible. There are no streetlights in 1346, no ambient glow from distant cities. When the moon hides behind clouds, as it's doing now, the darkness is absolute, the kind that makes you understand why medieval people believed the night belonged to demons and evil spirits. You're crouched on the outer wall with your suicide squad, Jeffrey with his ruined back, head wound man whose name you've realized you never learned, and limping man who's somehow supposed to move quietly despite his injured leg. For broken soldiers about to attempt something that trained, healthy troops would struggle with, right? You whisper, because even talking at normal volume feels dangerous. We go down the ladder on the Bailey side, move along the base of the inner wall, look for a lone sentry or someone using the latrines, grab him, get back, quick and quiet. And if we're spotted? Jeffrey asks. Then we die screaming instead of in our sleep. At least it's a choice. It's not funny, but Jeffrey laughs anyway. A short, pained sound that speaks to how far beyond normal human emotion you've all traveled. The descent from the outer wall into the Bailey is terrifying in its own right. The ladder is barely visible in the darkness, and one wrong step means a fall that'll break bones at best. Your wounded arm screams as you grip the rungs. Jeffrey's lashed back makes him move like an old man. But somehow, you all make it down. The Bailey is worse than you imagined. During the day, it looked like simple open ground between two walls. At night, it's a landscape of shadows and unknown obstacles. You can't see the ground properly, can't tell a shadow from a hole, can't distinguish a pile of rubble from a crouching enemy. You move forward in a crouch, feeling your way, every step a gamble. Your armor still haven't taken it off, still wearing days of accumulated misery, clinks softly with each movement. In the daytime chaos of battle, it would be inaudible. In the night silence, each sound feels like a bell announcing your presence. The inner fortress wall looms above you, barely visible as a darker darkness against the sky. You can hear sounds from beyond it, voices, footsteps, the ordinary sounds of a garrisoned fortress at night. They're so close, maybe 30 feet of stone away, living their lives, completely unaware that 4 desperate men are hunting for one of them. You edge along the base of the inner wall, hands touching stone to maintain orientation. The wall is cold, slightly damp, and here and there you feel marks, damage from siege weapons, old repairs, the accumulated scars of a fortress that's seen conflict before. Then you hear it footsteps. Someone's approaching from around the curve of the wall. Alone. From the sound of it. This is exactly what you're looking for, and now that it's here, you're terrified. You press yourself flat against the wall, the others doing the same. The footsteps get closer. You can hear breathing now, someone walking without particular caution. Probably a sentry on routine patrol, bored, tired, thinking about being anywhere else. Just like you. He rounds the corner and walks right past your position. You can see his silhouette, now a man in mail, carrying a spear, alone. Perfect target. You wait until he's a few steps past, then move. Your arm screams in protest as you grab him from behind, one hand over his mouth, the other going for his weapon. He's strong, fresher than you, better fed, not wounded, and he immediately struggles. Jeffrey and head wound man pile on, trying to control his arms, trying to keep him quiet. He's making muffled sounds against your hand, trying to scream, trying to alert his friends. His spear clatters to the ground, too loud, far too loud in the night silence. You're all grappling now, a tangle of bodies and armor and desperation. Then he does what you should have expected, but somehow didn't. The bites down on your hand. Hard. His teeth find the gap between your gauntlet and sleeve and sink in with the determination of a man fighting for his life. You nearly scream, manage to turn it into a strangled gasp. Your hand releases his mouth involuntarily, and he draws breath to shout. Jeffrey, moving faster than you thought possible for a man with a destroyed back, smashes his fist into the French soldier's temple. The man goes limp. For a horrible moment, you think Jeffrey's killed him, but no's breathing, just unconscious. You've got your prisoner. Move, you hiss, already trying to lift the unconscious Frenchman. Before someone heard that, getting back is worse than getting there. The French soldier is dead weight, probably weighs as much as your armor, and you're trying to carry him while wounded, exhausted, and terrified. Jeffrey helps, despite his back, and together you half drag, half carry him toward the outer wall. That's when you hear the shouts. Someone did hear. The alarm is being raised. Within seconds, the inner fortress is waking up, defenders mobilizing, and you're in the Bailey, the designated killing ground, with an unconscious prisoner and no quick escape route. Run. Someone screams, might be you, and you're stumbling through darkness, the French soldier bouncing between you and Jeffrey, heading for the outer wall that you can barely see. A crossbow bolt hits stone near your head, sparking in the darkness. They're shooting blind, but there are enough of them that blind might still hit. Another bolt, another. You hear limping man cry out's hit. You don't know where, don't have time to check. The ladder, you can see it now, a slightly less dark vertical line against the outer wall. But there's no way to climb while carrying an unconscious man. No way to get everyone up before the French reach you. Go! Jeffrey shouts, shoving the prisoner toward you. Get him up. I'll delay them. You can't. I'm already dead, he says, and there's something like peace in his voice. Lashed back. Probably infected. Won't see home again anyway. Might as well mean something. Before you can argue, he's turned back toward the pursuing French, sword drawn, making himself a target to buy you time. You hear him shouting challenges in the darkness. Hear the clash of weapons meeting. You and head wound man get the prisoner to the ladder. Somehow you'll never know quite how you manage to maneuver his unconscious body up while climbing, pushing and pulling. your wounded arm threatening to give out entirely. Head wound man is below, helping lift, his own head injury bleeding again from the exertion. You hear Jeffrey screaming, not in pinene defiance, in rage, in the voice of a man who's decided that if death is coming, he'll meet it on his feet. Then the scream cuts off abruptly. You reach the top of the outer wall and collapse, the French prisoner sprawling beside you. Head wound man makes it up a moment later. Limping man doesn't. You hear him down in the bailey, crying for help, but the French are there now and any rescue attempt would be suicide. His cries stop quickly. You tell yourself they took him prisoner. You know better. English soldiers rush to your position, summoned by the commotion. They grab the French prisoner, drag him away for questioning. The captain appears, looks at your group 2 men where there should be 4 and nods. Good work, he says. Prisoner acquired. Return to your posts. Good work. Jeffrey is dead in the bailey, his body probably being mutilated by angry French soldiers. Limping man is dead or captured, probably wishing he was dead. You're bleeding from a new bite wound on your already infected arm. Head wound man looks like he might collapse at any moment. But you got the prisoner. Mission successful. The captain walks away, already forgetting about you, probably already planning the next impossible task. You slump against the parapet, shaking from exhaustion and shock and rage and grief. The French prisoner will be questioned, probably tortured for information he may or may not have. Jeffrey died to capture him. Limping man died trying to bring him back. And for what? So the captain can report to the Lord that intelligence was gathered? So the siege can continue its grinding course? Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers formed genuine bonds with their comrades or whether the constant death made attachment impossible. You can answer that now. 2. You form bonds, and then you watch those bonds die, and then you form new ones because the alternative is being completely alone in hell. Dawn begins to break, painting the sky in shades of gray. You've been awake for over 24 hours. Your arm is throbbing. The bite wound has probably introduced exciting new infections to join the existing ones. Your body feels like it belongs to someone else, someone much older and closer to death. The inner fortress still stands, impregnable and hostile. The siege continues. Men will die today, just like they died yesterday, just like they'll die tomorrow. The trenches will collapse and be redug. The walls will be assaulted and defended. The wounded will be mistreated by well-meaning surgeons. The hierarchy will issue orders that kill the people following them. And you'll be here, on this wall, watching it all happen, waiting for your turn to be the casualty, the example, the forgotten name in a siege that history will record as a footnote. The siege has become its own entity now, a grinding machine that consumes men and material and purpose, leaving only exhaustion and death. You're not fighting for England anymore, or for your lord, or for any noble cause. You're fighting because stopping means punishment, and punishment means death. And death at least means rest. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and immediately the sergeant is shaking you awake. No sleeping on watch. French could attack any moment. Of course they could. They always could. That's the point. Constant vigilance, constant fear, constant readiness, until vigilance becomes impossible and fear becomes normal and readiness becomes a sick joke because you're too broken to be ready for anything. But you open your eyes. You pick up your weapon. You face the inner fortress that you'll probably never breach. Because this is medieval siege warfare. And you don't get to stop just because every part of you is screaming to. The sun rises higher, burning away the night's concealing darkness. Somewhere in the English camp, the French prisoner is being questioned. Somewhere in the Bailey, Jeffrey's body is growing cold. Somewhere beyond all this, there's a world where farms need tending and families need feeding and life continues without siege warfare. But you're not in that world. You're here, on this wall, in this moment, living a medieval nightmare that shows no sign of ending. You survived the night, barely. The victory feels hollow, because you know another night is coming, and another after that, and eventually your luck will run out. Eventually, the trenches or the walls or the disease or the hierarchy will claim you. But not today. Today, you're still breathing, still standing, still trapped in the grinding horror of a medieval siege. Welcome to the endgame, where survival is measured in hours, where every sunrise is a surprise, and where death would almost be a relief if it didn't mean losing the only thing you have left: stubborn, stupid, senseless life. The siege grinds on, but for you, the immediate urgency begins to fade. Days blur together in a haze of exhaustion, pain, and vigilance. Your wounds, both the initial cut and the bite wound, somehow don't kill you, though the scars they leave are twisted and ugly. The French prisoner gave up information, or didn't, or gave false information. You never learn which. It doesn't matter. The fortress eventually falls, or doesn't, or is abandoned, or surrenders. The specifics escape you because by then you're too tired to care about the outcome. You're just grateful to be ordered away from the walls, away from the trenches, away from the grinding machine of siege warfare. As you finally stumble away from the battlefield, heading toward whatever comes next home, another siege, death on a different field, you carry with you the knowledge that you survived something that broke better men than you. Not through skill or bravery, but through dumb luck and stubbornness and the simple fact that you were too tired to die. The medieval battlefield claimed Jeffrey, Limping Man, and countless others whose names you never knew. It scarred you physically and mentally in ways that will never fully heal. It taught you that glory is a lie told by people who've never bled in a trench, that honor is a luxury for those who aren't fighting just to see tomorrow. You wouldn't last a day in medieval battlefield trenches because nobody was meant to. The fact that you lasted several is less a testament to human resilience and more an indictment of the casual cruelty of medieval warfare, where men were thrown into impossible situations and expected to endure until they couldn't anymore. And somehow, impossibly, you did endure. You're walking away, broken but breathing, carrying scars and memories and the certain knowledge that you never, ever want to see a siege trench again. Sleep well, knowing that your bed, whatever its flaws, is infinitely preferable to a medieval battlefield. And be grateful that the closest you'll ever get to siege warfare is listening to someone describe it while you drift off to somewhere warm and safe and far from the grinding nightmare of medieval combat. Rest easy. You've survived the trenches, at least in imagination. That's more than enough for anyone.